I've been dating my sweetheart for a considerable length of time. Currently, I'll moniker her Nikin. It began honestly sufficient that I remarked on one of her Instagram stories and we began visiting. From that point, at last I got her number and afterwards Snapchat. The following 7 days we met face to face. We began balancing out just after special times of year in January, and the prospect of Valentine's Day was all generally coming up. It was decent having begun conversing with a young lady around that time, so I wouldn't feel the fear of being separated from everyone else on that irritating occasion yet. As Valentine's Day drew nearer and Nikin and I were a couple of dates in, she trusted in me about a stalker circumstances she'd been managing. The man's name is Ben, and he's a person a couple of years more established than Nikki, who ended up going to a similar suburbanity school, as she met her in class for a gathering project and chased after her grounds a couple of times. She never elaborated on police or anything. Amazingly, listening to that, this person found where she resided, sent her a lot of dreadful messages, which she disregarded. She said she never hindered the number since she needed to find out how far he would turn out without getting the clues. When I measured why she was picking now to draw this out into the open, she said on the grounds that he began contacting her again explicitly for Valentine's Day. As you can see here, he began sloping up the messaging again as Valentine's Day moved toward. She proceeded to simply disregard it and let the texts stack up, yet he carried it to a higher level when he left a container of Russell Stover chocolates close to home. She realized it was from him since he messaged her, "I want to believe that you like the gift I left you." This was the point at which she chose to stop it and answered to him with a long message, which I won't share for her security yet. In short, she said he really wants assistance and that she's seeing somebody now, so to let her be, there are various ways of getting somebody's location this day and mature. However, she was frightened that he got it by following her home one day. I gave my all to ensure that she realized I wouldn't allow him to do anything to her. Nikin sent me an unsettling screen capture. It was a screen capture of some message from a phony number inquiring as to whether the person she was seeing was me, as in, he composed my name. Now I felt included, and that caused me to feel modestly awkward. To this point, all I've known about this person was that he was an exceptionally dreadful and excessively diligent texter, and possibly followed the young lady I'm seeing home to her home, and presently he's messaging her on counterfeit numbers, raising my name. It was arriving where Nikki was near, calling the police. If this didn't stop, I told her I'd go to the police headquarters with her in the event that you connected once again. Quick forward to Valentine's Day. It was on a Friday this year. Nikin and I went out to eat at a pleasant cafe that sat on the water. We were at an external table on the grounds that the weather conditions were decent. As we ate, we both paid heed to a person sitting on a seat beyond the feasting region by the parking area with a cap obviously pulled down his face as though he were concealing. Nikki made a joke. Imagine a scenario in which that is Ben. We giggled, traveled toward us as we were taking a gander at him, and afterward he immediately turned away, and seconds after the fact he moved up and left. We weren't snickering any longer now. We really scrutinized the possibilities of that truly being him. However, following a couple of moments, the discussion moved to something different, and we partook in the remainder within recent memory. There subsequently, we needed to continue to hang out. It was Valentine's Day, all things considered, yet her folks were home. I had the spot to myself, so we went together back to my investment property. We were on the love seat, and things were getting a smidgen closer. That is when Nikki pulled away from me and expressed out loud whatever it was that I heard it too. "Something from outside in the terrace. Believe I should go check?" I asked. She gestured her head. I went out to the lawn porch, hoping to hear a creature rushing off in response to my presence. I slipped on my slides and strolled around the yard, searching for whatever might have fallen over, and I found what made the commotion. The whole pile of oceanside seats that was resting on the house had been pushed over. I don't have any idea how that would happen, except if a person or thing found them. There wasn't even the smallest breath. That evening I glanced around at the shrubs that enveloped our yard, and afterward, as though my mind quickly could detect something awkward, I secured in my vision on something tall in the brambles. My neck stuck forward as I, in a real sense, attempted to concentrate on and get a superior gander at what I was seeing. I ventured forward a couple of steps. I had a gracious second when I understood it was somebody remaining in the shrubberies. I had seen me notice him by this point, I said. The person began rapidly emerging from the shrubberies at a sufficiently fast speed that I accepted it as a danger, as though he were going to charge at me. I took the risk to get him on the ground when he was all the while battling with the brambles and twigs, and I hollered at him to remain down various times. I shouted Nikki's name until she came outside, and I said, "Call the police." The person on the ground battled and attempted to get free a couple of times, but I pretty much had him in a consistent hold when Nikki came outside while chatting with the police. I inquired as to whether this was the person she wheezed and said, "Good gracious." Yes, it was the Ben fellow who had been badgering her. What's more regrettable is that at that point I understood he was wearing the very huge shirt that the person with the cap from prior at the eatery was wearing. Police got to the house and placed him in binds. He would be accused of intruding and exploiting. The second Nikki showed the officials all of the bothersome and fanatical messages she'd been getting from him since he was at that point. Being, however, Nikki squeezed charges for following and provocation, which the person at last wound up paying a fine for and getting a wrongdoing. Nicken got a request for security against him, and presently, if he at any point reaches her again, he'll be captured again. Ben was a definitive killjoy, and thanks to God, he's in some sure mostly brilliant enough to not have reached her once more. Valentine's Day was approaching, so my boyfriend and I planned a romantic dinner, as most couples do. As we were walking into the restaurant, there was the woman from the couple stood up and introduced herself as Mrs. Greddy. I found it very strange. I took a look at my beau. The woman had her hand raised. This couple is oddly staring at my sweetheart. I slightly push my sweetheart's arm as we enter, and he gives out his name to be placed in the wait line. The host said there would be a 45-minute pause, and she said she would message us when our table was ready. My beau said we should go to the small golf course across the road, so we strolled back to his car. I gave her a shake, not meaning to be impolite. She explained that she and her partner thought we were a really attractive couple, and that since they were photographers, they thought we would take amazing pictures. She then said that she had no card with her, except for their place, which is 5 minutes away by car, and they could take us there as well. When she realized that the standby time would be lengthy, my sweetie politely declined and told her we had things to do. Look was as yet one of the most tormenting looks ever as she grinned and plunked down close to the spouse. As we got in the vehicle, I let my beau know how unpleasant that communication was and how the husband didn't say a word. As we entered the smaller than usual golf course, we were shocked to find it void. We dismissed, "What is happening yet?" Truly, I'm still creeped out as this spot isn't exactly enormous. You can see the front entryway on every one of the levels, so as we're on our 5th round, I hear the entry chime ring. I go to look, and my heart sinks. It's a similar woman with her significant other. She appears to glance around, and afterward, as we visually connect, she gives me the creepiest grin. I let my sweetheart know, and he goes to look as they're getting their things. I tell my beau I'm awkward, and we ought to simply go stand by in the vehicle as 15 minutes have passed as of now, so it wouldn't be significantly longer. He concurs, and we pivot, and they're right behind us, giving us the broadest grins. Insane how we both arrived at this spot, said Mrs. Greddy. This time the spouse says we ought to confront each other. Greddy versus Barr, my sweetheart's heart sank at that time as his last name is Poles. We considerately declined, not having any desire to know how they realized that data, and we said we needed to go. Both of their grins blurred as we hurried out of there. I told my sweetheart we ought to simply tap out and return to his place since it was nearer than mine. In addition, my folks wouldn't be home until Sunday morning. He said we would pursue supper and not let some arbitrary strange couple ruin the night. For us, we held up around 15 minutes in his vehicle discussing how bizarre the circumstance was as he gets a text from the cafe saying they're prepared as far as we're concerned. We have supper and he demands I'm paying today since it's Valentine's Day. As we typically split the bill, he goes to the restroom
and as I'm holding up, I assumed I saw that woman looking out from around a corner. I persuaded myself it was simply in my mind my beau prepares out and is to go now to arrive at his place. You need to take this long street encompassed by trees. As we start the drive, we notice a vehicle following behind. I let my significant other know, and we head into a CVS parking area. I need to utilize the bathroom, and since it would have been a drive, we both get out and go. When we come out, we don't see that vehicle that was possibly following us anyplace. So we advance toward his home. You realize that street I discussed before being encircled by trees, well, while we're driving on it, we're like 3 to 5 minutes onto this street. We heard a boisterous pop, and my beau halted his vehicle. His 2 front tires had popped. He came to an obvious conclusion and hurried to the vehicle, expressing his desire to get out. There's not substantially more time before they arrive here. He cut his motor, switched out the lights, and locked the entryway. I was so frightened and confounded, not realizing what was happening. I let him know we ought to stand by in the vehicle. He immediately got me and we ran into the forest. He advised me to shush. We were taking cover behind certain trees and shrubs. While we concealed, he called the police and immediately made sense of where we were at and what was occurring. The administrator requested to remain on the line, and the police would be here 2 or 3 minutes. He said he was unable to remain available and hung up as we remained setting down. We heard a motor coming up. My sweetheart said to lay level, as he did too. We heard the motor to the vehicle stop, and we heard the natural voice of Mrs. Greddy, assuming that was even her genuine name. She hollered we had taken too long. We heard a vehicle entryway close, and afterward, a vehicle rapidly hurried away. We remained down until the police arrived, which was around 2 minutes after the fact. We made sense of the circumstance and got told we would be reached if something came up. I called my sister to come to get us, and he called the tow truck for his vehicle. 4 years later, nothing has come up on it, and we never figured out what they needed or what their identity was. We're currently hitched with an insane story to tell our children.